Today, I will tell you what happened to the legendary brands that have exited the market. I'll explore the reasons behind the disappearance of LG, Siemens, Sony Ericsson, and BlackBerry smartphones from store shelves, how the big brands died, and where the tech whales are going to die. In 2021, LG announced its departure from the smartphone market. According to the company's CEO, the competition had become too intense, leading to this difficult decision. Over the past 5 years, the mobile business had only brought losses to LG. Since 2016, not a single smartphone release achieved commercial success. The company's decline was gradual. Initially, new models started to appear less frequently, and their sales significantly dwindled. Eventually, the brand had to withdraw from many international markets. In the entire year of 2020, LG released only 7.2 million smartphones. For context, the Xiaomi Redmi Note 8, launched in the same year, sold 30 million units in just the month of May. However, LG nostalgically remembers the days of its glory. Models like the LG Chocolate, Optimus G, Nexus 4, and Nexus 5 are still fondly recalled by the brand's enthusiasts. Perceptions may suggest that LG smartphones sold on par with Samsung or Apple, but the reality differs. Consider the record year of 2015 for LG. This is how the market shares were distributed at the end of the first quarter. It turns out that even at its peak, LG's market share was comparable to that of Chinese companies. This was during a period when Huawei and Xiaomi were just beginning to gain momentum, and within 2 years, they had already outpaced the Korean company by 2 or 3 times. In reality, LG had success in the era of basic phones, and their smartphones, in terms of unit sales, never approached their own 2009 figures. The company's downfall was accelerated by its own experimental products. Starting with the LG G Flex, the brand began to release rather unconventional devices. There were models with detachable batteries or additional screens. Take the latest LG Wing, for example. What exactly was it?
I don't know.
At first glance, such experiments seemed interesting, but in reality, the company was alienating its loyal audience. LG was like that overzealous joker in a raucous gathering who draws a mustache on a sleeping friend with a felt-tip pen, or does something equally absurd. He annoys everyone. They say to him, "Stop! Go to sleep. You've already dismantled the mobile unit." And yet, at CES 2021, he unzips his pants and shows everyone the LG Rollable. The company is now focusing on displays, TVs, and home appliances. In 1997, the German brand Siemens amazed the world by introducing the S10, the world's first phone with a color screen. In 2001, they produced a cell phone with MP3 support. I remember it. It was the strangest thing. You're holding a simple cell phone with a monochrome screen, and it plays MP3s from a 32 megabyte flash drive. It's mind-blowing even now, and back then, it seemed like magic. After all, not every smartphone had such capabilities. There was the Siemens A55 with interchangeable panels, the M65, a tank with a rugged case, and the C65, on which I used to play Gravity at school. They weren't just smartphones, they were legends. When Siemens released its first phone in 1985, it was already a giant working in several dozen sectors. However, in the early 2000s, competition began to intensify. Numerous brands emerged, each trying to surprise with a new feature. Siemens struggled to keep up with this competition for various reasons. However, unlike LG, they didn't gradually deteriorate and shut down their mobile division. Instead, they made a smarter move and decided to sell it. In 2005, Siemens Mobile, with all its developments and patents, was sold to the Korean company BenQ, but even they couldn't revive the brand. By 2006, BenQ Siemens declared bankruptcy. Today, Siemens no longer manufactures smartphones, but the company is still thriving, involved in gas turbines, medical equipment, and home appliances. A curious feature of BlackBerry phones that few people know about. If you shine ultraviolet light under the cover, logos appear. Such a test for originality. And this is how a brand new BlackBerry looks like. With a keyboard, a sleek design that evokes curiosity, and a QWERTY keyboard that 99.9% of smartphones today lack. I'd buy the hell out of it. But you've probably guessed by now that there's one but. It's a render. And a pretty old one at that. The fact is that the rights to produce smartphones under the BlackBerry brand have now been transferred to the American company Onward Mobility. Let's revisit the golden days when BlackBerry was at the peak of its popularity. In 2009, BlackBerry was named the fastest-growing company in the world, with a revenue increase of 84% over 3 years, despite the global economic crisis. Canadian smartphones with QWERTY keyboards were coveted by the youth, owned by businessmen, and purchased by the entire American elite, from the president to Justin Bieber. Their operating system competed fiercely with iOS, Android, and Symbian. In just 10 years, the company sold 50 million devices, making BlackBerry the second most popular brand globally after Nokia. What could have gone wrong?
Everything.
The company was founded by the brilliant playboy and philanthropist Mike Lazaridis. Its first device, released in 1997, functioned similarly to a pager. The company always prioritized security and reliability, and its pagers performed admirably on September 11, 2001, during the tragic events. When all mobile networks in New York and Washington failed, BlackBerry devices continued to operate through their own Mobitex network. Their first phone, the BlackBerry 5810, was released in 2002 and already exhibited the brand's recognizable traits. A physical keyboard and modest sales became hallmarks of all BlackBerry devices. Their first smartphone was introduced in 2006, and a year later, it boasted impressive sales figures in 120 countries. However, in 2007, the first iPhone was launched, and BlackBerry identified Apple as their primary competitor. A fierce brand battle ensued, leading to BlackBerry's downfall. Apple introduces the iPhone 2, and BlackBerry counters with the storm, but it fails in sales. iPhone 3G versus BlackBerry Bold 9000, and again BlackBerry falls short. The company responded to the iPhone 4 with the BlackBerry Torch, which also failed. They even responded to the launch of the iPad with the BlackBerry Playbook, but it sold poorly and garnered negative reviews. Because of that, they had to drastically reduce the price. Luck has always been on Apple's side. BlackBerry's popularity was sharply declining in the US, Canada, and the UK. Apple simply destroyed the competition. In 2013, BlackBerry 10, the company's brand new smartphone operating system, was unveiled. It was intended to rival the iPhone and primarily focused on touch control. However, the result was quite the opposite. BlackBerry 10 became the final nail in the coffin for the once great corporation. Users found it unintuitive, challenging to master, and even glitch-ridden. Immediately after the operating system's presentation, the company's shares plummeted by 12%. The new smartphones, intended to operate on BlackBerry 10, were a resounding failure. Extensive time and money had been invested in their development, and there was no way to recoup these costs. Therefore, in the summer of 2013, BlackBerry officially announced its intention to sell the business. But potential buyers were not rushing in. Everyone recognized the brand's strength, but they also realized that the company faced numerous problems. Any buyer would need to completely rebuild marketing, address many issues with the operating system, and invest heavily in development. As a result, BlackBerry, unable to find a buyer, laid off 40% of its staff that year and incurred a $1 billion loss. The fact that BlackBerry didn't collapse in 2013 is a phenomenon defying logical explanation. The company's ability to continue producing smartphones for 3 more years after that, and even manage some profit, can be considered an even more extraordinary miracle. Only in 2016 did they find a buyer. However, they were unable to sell the production equipment, patents, and developments. Only the rights to the brand were auctioned. BlackBerry made several agreements with Chinese companies, which were granted permission to use the BlackBerry name for 4 years for new smartphones targeted at the markets of India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. But naturally, these devices bore no resemblance to the legendary BlackBerry. They were based on a substandard version of Android, and the prices were as high as those of premium devices. As a result, the Chinese firms never succeeded in reviving the brand. The company still exists today, but its current identity is unclear. The Chinese company TCL, which owned the rights to the brand, announced that it had ceased selling BlackBerry phones. The license rights then went to the American company Onward Mobility. BlackBerry simply lacked the willingness to abandon its own OS and switch to Android in a timely manner. Now, few people will remember the Ericsson phone, because they were wildly popular somewhere in the late 90s and early 2000s. The scale of the concern was so vast that it was not particularly eager to delve seriously into cell phone production. The Swedes prioritized communication services, television technology, and other areas as more important. For the company, it was crucial to make the cell phone division break even. However, as fate would have it, in 2000 there was a catastrophic fire at the Philips factory in New Mexico. This factory supplied chips for the production of Nokia and Ericsson phones. While Nokia promptly terminated its contract with the factory and managed to switch to alternative suppliers within a month, Ericsson chose to stand by Philips. They expected Philips to quickly restore production lines and resume chip supply. Consequently, it took 6 months to rehabilitate the plant, and Ericsson suffered financial losses throughout this period. The brand began cutting costs in every possible way, reducing staff and halting expensive developments. Therefore, when Sony proposed launching a joint brand in December 2000, Ericsson readily agreed. Swedish communication technology and Japanese quality were fused in Sony Ericsson phones. I still regard their logo as one of the best ever created. It was satisfying to feel it under my fingers on the back cover of the device, and even just to gaze at it. Sony Ericsson phones reached their zenith by 2005. Sony handled the design and marketing, while Ericsson contributed the internal components, characterized the devices, and conducted the research. At that time, the company introduced a line of music phones, branding it with the Walkman name. This became a hallmark of Sony Ericsson. Sony also leveraged the CyberShot brand for phones equipped with quality cameras. Devices such as the Sony Ericsson T610, K750, and W800 paved the way to success. However, over time, Sony Ericsson's position started to wane. To advance the mobile division, substantial investments in development and production were necessary, along with significant expenditures on scientific research. The Swedes were reluctant to make these investments. Additionally, internal conflicts arose within the company regarding their individual brands. Sony Ericsson was developing gaming smartphones, but when Sony learned of this, they prohibited their release, asserting it would negatively impact the PlayStation brand. What the heck, you might ask? Indeed, it sounded absurd back then as well. It was simply a sign that things were not going smoothly within the company, with one division unable to align with the other. So, in 2011, the Swedes simply sold their stake in Sony and continued to produce telecommunications equipment. The Sony Ericsson brand existed for a total of 10 years. During this period, it garnered a huge fan base, and it did so through hard work and dedication. Their devices were innovative in features, design, and software. It was an authentic brand that communicated honestly with consumers, without resorting to misleading marketing tactics. After the acquisition, thousands of patents and developments transitioned into Sony's hands. However, the new incarnation bore little resemblance to the old Sony Ericsson. Sony's strategy shifted towards producing sleek, high-priced devices with rather average specifications. Not only did the company fail to bring forth innovations, but the Japanese also began making rather bizarre decisions. After taking over Sony Ericsson, they announced a series of new smartphones, but added the Xperia brand to their names, resulting in the unwieldy Sony Ericsson Xperia Arc, Sony Ericsson Xperia Play, Neo, Ray, Pro, Mini, Mini Pro, Arc S, and Neo V. In their prime, Sony Ericsson manufactured outstanding smartphones, setting trends that even Nokia and other companies followed. But now, it's evident that those days are gone. The company had lost its way. Eventually, it was decided to drop the Ericsson brand from the smartphone names, leaving just Sony Xperia, which occasionally produced appealing phones, but lacked any groundbreaking achievements. Sony's mobile division has teetered on the brink of closure several times. Even today, the brand survives primarily thanks to its loyal fan base. I will always cherish the era when Sony Ericsson was at its zenith.